All of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
After spending 6 weeks wanting to punch Harold Shawley in the face, we've escaped the web of fear, and now Victoria, a notorious screamer, wants to hang out with an oil rig full of thirsty roughnecks. There's going to be so much sticky white stuff shooting about, the BBC might have to hide this story and pretend it never happened. I'm Ian.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to All of Time and Space. Before we join our guest, let's find out where we are in the story. In the dark, uncharted depths of the North Sea, it has lurked, growing in strength, growing in size, and striking terror into the hearts of mariners down the untold centuries. Landing near a North Sea gas refinery off the east coast of England, the TARDIS crew are immediately accused of sabotage. Several rig crews have mysteriously vanished, strange pressure build-ups have been detected, and in the refinery's pipelines, the Doctor can hear the steady rhythmic beat of what? Soon the Doctor, Jamie and Victoria will find themselves at the unrelenting mercy of the deadliest and most terrifying foe they have ever encountered. We'll be back after this.
Well, it's what it says, Jamie. It's Euro Sea gas.
Gas from the sea? Who are you trying to kid?
So it's nothing to do with the foam, then?
No, I shouldn't think so. That is.
Will it not budge?
No, it won't touch it, I'm afraid, Jamie. Oh, well, have to use this.
What's that?
It's a sonic screwdriver. Never fails. There we are. Neat, isn't it? All done by sound waves. Now, what have we got here? Oh, yes.
What is it? What's that noise?
I don't know, Jamie.
And welcome back. And we have been joined by the rather wonderful Richard Smith from Something Who. Hello, Richard.
Hello there. Hello, Ian. Hello, Mark.
Hello, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Well, it's nice to meet you both, having listened to a number of episodes previously.
I'm so sorry. Well, that's the pleasant bit for you out of the way. Now, unfortunately, it's time, Ian.
Yeah, it's time for me to join in the conversation, which is never anyone's favourite part of the show. In actual fact, Richard, it's time for you to face a little quiz we're calling the Mind Probe.
What? No, not the Mind Probe.
No, not the Mind Probe.
Oh, that's peak Jericho.
That was excellent. I did enjoy that. I'm tempted to give you 1 point already just for that. The premise is very simple, Richard. If you defeat the Mind Probe, you will be returned at the end of the show to your customary time and place. But if you fail in the challenge, then my sweaty palmed henchman Castellan Cockram here is literally frothing to toss you vigorously,
foaming, you could say,
into the time lash. Are you ready, therefore, for some, fairly simple trivia questions?
I'm certainly not sure I can cope with all that glitter, so yeah.
Well, this was the only dress I had. So, you're just going to have to work with it. I admit the eyeshadow was overkill, but hey, you know.
Hey, look, you got the legs for it. Why not?
I know, right? I know. So, looking down the list of questions, they're all very subjective. You'll either know them or you won't, so there's no shame in not knowing anything. Get 3 or more right, and you've won. Get 3 or more wrong, and we'll take you around the back and beat you up at the end of the show. So, you know, just a bit of gentle fun to kick things off. Are you ready for question 1?
I mean, I like it when you just lay it straight on the line like that. Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Yeah. Right, good, let's do it. Name the 2001 novel by Sir Salman Rushdie set in New York City.
I can't help feeling there's going to be deep in the answer, but it's not coming to me.
Or maybe a Fury.
Have a guess.
Is it The Deep?
I like your thinking. I see you fell into the trap of assuming it was going to be a word from the story title.
Yeah.
The book was actually called Fury. So moving on to question number 2. Question second. Question B. Name the lead single from 2010's album 21 by the popular singer Adele.
Now that is Rolling in the Deep.
Excellent. Right, you are.
Got it.
It was originally going to be Roland in the Deep. It was going to be about Roland Browning from Grange Hill, but the label talked her out of it. They said it was too niche and the video would be horrific.
I would have bought it.
Question 3. yeah, so would I. Question 3. In which 2014 movie did Brad Pitt play a character called War Daddy?
I believe that film is called Fury.
How right you are!
Oh, he's good.
Oh, this is looking like a demolition drive here.
It's very disappointing.
I mean, you know,
Richard off.
I'll read out question 4, but it doesn't matter now.
Yeah,
it's
all
academic
now, isn't
it?
it?
Question 4. Which episode of the popular BBC children's programme Doctor Who was first broadcast on the 5th of January 1984?
That would be Warriors of the Deep.
Which episode?
Oh, that's harsh.
Just to try and eke some drama out of this thing.
Which episode is on the 5th?
Yeah.
It would be one of them. It would either be 1 or 2 because
Wouldn't
it would be
it,
immediately after the New Year.
Yeah.
I'll go for 1.
He's got it. Oh. Okay. True. Right, question 5. I'm going to introduce it numerically before I go wading in. Question 5. True or false? Pearl Jam's debut album 10 featured a song called Fury.
I'm afraid I'm not. I'm not a fan of, or I just don't know Pearl Jam at all. So sorry about that. It's blind spot, cultural blind spot. I will say false.
He is correct. It is false because there was a song called Deep.
Richard strikes me very much as an Alice in Chains man.
Well, I mean, that might just be a special background he's dropped in for today's recording. We don't know if that's his actual dungeon or...
I did reveal my hand earlier before we started recording, but in terms of my musical genre. But anyway,
yes, that's true. If only there'd been a mashup between... Yeah. All right, question 6. I think you've got them all right so far, so I'm not remotely worried about your capacity to deal with this one. Question number 6. Number 110 in the Target book series. In what year was Victor Pemberton's bumper volume of Fury from the Deep published?
I believe it was 1986.
He's got a full house mark.
Oh my God.
And the reason why I believe that is because it was the year that I left home. And sadly, I had no time for reading Doctor Who books once I was a fully paid up member of the workforce. So I bought it and then it just sat on the shelf. which isn't very helpful considering that we're talking about it in a minute. But anyway, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, wow. Well, I mean, so congratulations from a quiz point of view. That was a strong showing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm done.
Very impressive.
I'm sorry about that, about the lack of suspense there. That was very poor of me. But there we go.
One day you may be invited back, and I will be here waiting for you.
And they won't be nearly as easy next time round, I'm sure.
Oh no.
Oh no. Oh, actually, there is a spare question here. If a quark is travelling at 0.3 times the speed of light, what to the power of n is its relative density? So let's see how you get on with that, Mr.
Have you seen the Dominators?
Richard.
Quarks can't move that fast.
Different quark. Anyway, Mark, I'm sorry. I'm jibber jabbering on. I'm wasting people's time.
You are
I'm going
attacked.
to
That's
shut
fine.
up.
It's fine. It's okay. We're here to talk about Fury from the Deep. Richard, what's your association with the story? How far back does it go?
Well, I guess probably the first time that I was aware of Fury from the Deep, it was probably looking through my friend's copy of the Radio Times 10th anniversary special, probably,
Nice.
mid to late 70s. Certainly when I looked at the making of Doctor Who, the Terrance Dicks 76 version, I think I would have seen it in there. So I was aware of it, but I think not all that much aware of it. I mean, you get about a paragraph of description in both of those, and I mean that was it for a very long time. I mean, it's a missing story, but actually, when I was a fan in the late 70s, early 80s, originally, they might as well all have been missing. I mean, you just couldn't see any of the old stories, and so you basically lived on scraps from Jeremy Bentham's table, really.
Yeah, here in the UK, it was a very different story from the guys in America and Australia. They just had wall to wall.
Yeah.
Classic Who, didn't they? And we get the odd repeat every now and again, but not very much.
No, and this one always felt very missing. I mean, there was no target book, as we've just said, until the late 80s. And things like telesnaps and soundtrack, they were later on as well. So really, there was not much of a way to get hold of this one. I mean, there was always the stuff like the Fraser and Patrick's stories about the beach and the foam and so on. And I guess there was and Victoria screaming, but pretty much that was about all that was lodged in my mind about it.
Yeah, it's always had a bit of a reputation, I think, as being a classic.
Yeah.
Even if most of the people calling it a classic have never actually seen the original.
The other thing I can say is I saw Victor Pemberton once at Panopticon Convention in London.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was about 1987. And by that stage, I don't know if he was still trying to write for the series and had been, turned down or something, but he seemed a bit bitter about the state of current Doctor Who. But that was the year that Evil of the Daleks episode 2 had come back. And I think he was something like assistant script editor for that one. Anyway, he spent a long time referring to how brilliant it was. And frankly, I would agree with him, having watched it in the audience that day. It did seem better than the current series, which was, I think, season 23. But it's so I guess that's my other early association was sort of seeing Victor Pemberton. He did talk a bit about Fury from the Deep, but he was more exercised, I think, about the state of the current series than anything else.
So
that's rather interesting.
I'm very interested. I've not Google imaged the guy. What does Victor Pemberton look like? Is he tall, thin, short, bearded? What?
He had a moustache, as I recall.
Moustache, interesting.
I think he was sort of medium height, a bit of curly hair. That's it. That's my
sort of graying hair by that point. I guess.
I think he was keeping it. Whether it was graying or not, I don't think it was. You would have been able to see it. I think it was possibly dyed. Would be my memory.
Interesting.
May have got it completely wrong, but yeah.
So pretty much exactly like Hubert Rees from this story. Then brilliant.
I don't remember him having the Dickie Davis stripe like Robson. No. Ian,
Good evening.
with a sense of trepidation, I'm going to ask you, what's your first experience of this story?
Well, Mark, I'll tell you. I think my first experience would have been being sort of overwhelmed by the girth of the paperback in W.H. Smith's
Good Lord.
in Colchester in the let's say 1986. It looked very large, and I didn't immediately want to get to grips with it, so I didn't. And I've never heard it, I've never watched it until obviously the last couple of days when I have watched it via recons that were made available to me over the internet. What I will say is that I'd picked up a fact which turned out to be completely wrong, in that I had always believed this to be the first of Doctor Who's 2 5-part stories. So my sort of alarm as the final seconds of episode 5 were ticking along, and I was like,
That's quite a way to end a story, isn't it?
You've got a lot to do in the next minute, which they did not do. So yeah, I was a bit surprised to learn it was a 6-parter. I was surprised by a lot of other things in it as well, but yeah, very very lukewarm and shoddy experience and relationship with this story.
So were you watching telesnaps, or did you get to see the animated version?
It were telesnaps.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I thought I'd go old school for a change.
Yeah, I was very tempted to do that myself, but I thought, no, I haven't watched the animation since I got the Blu-ray, so I thought, I'll stick the animation on. Might have regretted that choice, but, it's fine.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends how long you like your arms, really, doesn't it?
Is it another one where they've all got like really long arms, like Ronnie Cox at the end of RoboCop, where he's
kind of
thrown out of the
expecting
building
Shaggy from Scooby-Doo to walk in at any point.
Yeah, I also went for the recon on that set, which I think's a really really good recon. But we might come eventually to why I chose that.
We really are spoiled, aren't we, with those physical releases? You've got every potential way of watching it. You can watch it in black and white animation, colour animation, telesnap reconstruction. I do like a recon, and we're not that far away from getting back to just only moving images. We've got one more season to go. So I'm going to miss them slightly in a weird way.
How many this possibly irrelevant, and maybe we can chop this bit from the show, but how many more stories am I going to have to look at photographs of?
Well, actually, I mean, this is the last story of which there are no episodes that survive, and I think there are just 2 others that have some missing episodes.
So I know the Space Pirates and
Wheel in Space, I think, is the other one you're going to have to grit your teeth through.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to get nostalgic. Can I just watch the Pertwee era with like a particular photograph of Katie Manning? Let's do that.
Oh, goodness me.
Make my own recon. Every day's Day of the Daleks in my house.
And there'll be plenty of tossing in the time lash. But anyway, let's get away from that particular
Mark, I'm
subject
very
of
disappointed that
conversation.
you've chosen to lower the tone for once.
Yeah.
Because contractually, I refer you to page 7. Only I am allowed to do that.
Well, I'm going to blame Joe Ford from A Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, because he was very kind and invited me onto his show to do a commentary on the Horns of Nimon.
Oh.
And it got very saucy quite early on, and it's all his fault.
So did he rub off on you?
He really did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, Richard. Normally, this is a slickly run, professional, serious
is
fan.
it though?
No.
No. So this was a slightly troubled production, if I've got my facts right. The script came in late. So the first 3 episodes came in on time, but then the rest were slightly late coming in, which meant that they had to change the order that they were recording the stories during season 5. So Dougie Camfield was due to direct this one.
Oh.
But because they had to swap the order around, he then got given Webb, which, considering this one's completely missing, is probably not such a bad thing. So Hugh David stepped in to do this one, who had previously done the Highlanders.
Yeah, I was going to say, poor old Hugh David. I mean, we seem to have a vendetta
Not had much
against
luck,
him.
has he? No. And he was also in contention for the part of the Doctor when Rex Tucker was casting his eye around as to who he would like to cast as the first Doctor. Because he was an actor back in the day before he took up directing. So, yeah, he's not had much luck, has he, really?
It's astonishing.
There's a lot of that in the water, actually, because both Derek Sherwin and Peter Bryant were former actors as well, weren't they? And Barry Letts. So, yeah, around this period, it feels like everyone's an ex-actor.
So, yes, that's meant a bit of a change in the schedule. I think there were issues as well with the budget got overspent, which seemed to be a recurring thing on season 5. And also, I think they were really pushed for time because they had to do a fair bit of location filming. Yeah. And it meant that on one of the studio days, they were literally going to the wire to get it finished. They usually would have, I think, 4 days of rehearsal, and they got 2, which still seems like a hell of a lot these days.
Yes.
It's very much, get out there and give it your best shot on the first take. But yeah, for them at the time, that would have been quite jarring, I would imagine.
Yeah, Vic Pemberton never mentioned this in 1986 or 7 or where it was I heard him, that his scripts were late. But maybe he'd forgotten it by then.
Interesting how the memory cheats sometimes, isn't it? So I'm assuming where it possibly ran over budget was obviously Troughton's woolly hat would have fetched a pretty penny. You don't just, go and buy one of them from Camden Market for
He brought that
3 and
himself.
6. And
He was
also,
going to wear that in between shots, and then he decided, no, I'm just going to wear it all the time.
Why
It's
not?
Bloody freezing.
Yeah, he should like a hat like that. Also,
did you know he used to wear a tea cosy on his head back in his Navy days?
I did not know that, and I'm wondering if you've made it up for comic effect.
No. His son, Michael Troughton, has done a biography of his dad, and he recounts his time as an officer in the Navy, and he obviously was a slightly eccentric gentleman and decided that instead of just getting a hat, he would put a tea cosy on his head.
So I'm wondering if it was just a rudimentary disguise he was forced to adopt when one of his other, the wrong wife was walking along and he had to take evasive action. But
see, I thought you were going to go with the whole Blackadder thing of putting your pants on your head and sticking some pencils up your nose.
No, in the end he was able to leave after the War Games without recourse to doing that.
Yeah.
But also this story is the second story in this 5th season of Doctor Who to just have a helicopter in it for a bit.
Yeah.
Why are they throwing away all their money
2
on
helicopters?
helicopters? No
not
helicopters
just
for the
one.
first
Yeah.
4 years, and then suddenly
Yeah.
everyone's got a helicopter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you like the idea of the TARDIS landing out at sea? Is that something a little bit different? I think the original plan was that they would land on top of a cliff and the TARDIS would start to topple off the edge of the cliff until someone remembered that they'd done that already in the Romans. So they then had to come up with another idea. So they thought it'd be rather a wheeze if they got a model of the TARDIS and suspended it from the helicopter and gently lowered it down onto the sea. Except it slightly capsized and sank the first time they did it, so they had to have a retake of that.
Oh, dear.
Well, yeah, I mean that is the thing, isn't it? Because in Logopolis, they attempt a similar move, and then they're worried that it is just going to sink. But obviously in Fury, it just somehow floats. In fact, not only does it float, but they're able to nip back halfway through the story, muck about in there for a bit, and then come back out again. Anyway, there we go.
I mean, I've got to say, I thought it, while it was visually interesting and a slightly fun way to break up the increasing monotony of that bloody thing materialising. Yeah, but the hostile action displacement system might not. It might have thought, A, probably being this far offshore puts them in danger of drowning, but B, being 700 feet up in the air, they might also sprain something on their way down to the water. So I'm just going to land here on the beach. I don't know. It's one of those thrilling and quite delightful inconsistencies that make the show so occasionally silly.
It's a bit of fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, apparently, according to Fraser Hines, he and Troughton and Debbie, yes, Watling, they weren't happy. It was too wet, too cold. Didn't want to muck about in a dinghy, and Fraser had blue knees, so he said.
Is that like Scottish for something else? Because I know he probably wanted to try it on with. Anyway, I'm going to stop myself.
It was very chaste, actually, wasn't it? Towards the end, when Jamie and Victoria had a moment, they were fond of each other.
Tender, wasn't it?
In a tender and innocent way.
Let's not turn to the tear-jerking elements of the story just yet. I'm trying to steel my resolve to tackle those without blubbing like a giant man, baby.
Yes.
I mean,
the foam machine gets another outing. They obviously spent a lot of money on that thing, and they're going to get their money's worth out of it.
Well, this is perhaps its ultimate usage. I mean, I've never seen so much white foam emerge from the shaft on the
Well, we consider what they're dumping into the coastal waters around the UK at the moment.
Well, exactly.
You'd be glad to see something white rather than
You couldn't
brown.
film this now, could you? It'd be called something else from the deep.
Yeah.
It's
Hepatitis from the deep.
Yeah, I mean, it shares quite a lot with Seeds of Death. I mean, you've got you've got the loads of foam. You've got them sort of diving through loads of foam on several occasions, but you've also got the Dudley Simpson piano music while they're doing it, which is sort of quite similar as well.
Mm-hmm. And the sonic screwdriver makes its first appearance.
Hooray!
Huzzah!
Yes.
Quite a basic model, I have to say. Looks very much like a pen light, really, doesn't it? But
it does.
Yeah.
What I liked about it was it's kind of introduced in a very offhand, matter-of-fact kind of way.
Yeah, they don't make a
does
big deal
one
about
specific function, and that's it. And it's not the get-out for every single cliffhanger for the next, 50 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Patrick Troughton asked Hugh David if he could have a really kind of jazzy model, and he said, "No, you can whistle." So that's what he ended up with.
Oh, it could have been worse. Could have been the sonic recorder, couldn't it? So.
Yeah.
You have to be grateful for small mercies. So, what do we make of the guest cast on this one? Are you a fan, Richard? Do you like do you rate them?
Well, we've got John Abineri.
Yes, stalwart of Doctor Who.
Yeah, and I mean he's going to, in a couple of years' time, he's going to be, second, third billing on Ambassadors of Death. He's got a slightly smaller part here, but it gives it a good amount, particularly for the 3 episodes that he's in it for, and we've also got the excitement of him, pulling a different accent as well. So I'm into that.
Mm-hmm. And we have, for my money anyway, in the one clip we've got of them, one of the creepiest duos ever to appear in 60s Doctor Who with Oak and Quill. That's just hundreds of levels of wrong.
See,
as they approach Mrs. Harris.
I think they were absolutely beautiful, just on a visual casting level, and in terms of a note-perfect performance. What's very what struck me, and this is probably very completely wide of the mark, but I feel I know where Neil Gaiman came up with Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandermeer when he wrote Neverwhere now.
Yeah.
Well, according to Victor Pemberton, he based them on Laurel and Hardy, who apparently he'd met, so he said. So yeah.
When they were originally going to be cast as the first Doctor.
Yeah, they missed out as well.
Oh dear.
I mean, yeah. So there's a little bit of film footage dropped into the recon of the two of them, and just really chilling. But also there's that that high camp kind of energy.
Yeah.
And they've both got really bad teeth or really good dental makeup. We don't know which it is, but we come back to the importance of dental hygiene, folks. Right, kids? So
I think they blackened their lips for this.
Yeah,
so that was
and they just
pretty great.
and that sort of I think that was lovely.
Yeah.
And his eyes are popping out of his head.
Oh,
God,
very much.
give Tom Baker a run for his money.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were one of a number of high points of the story. Would you back me up in that, or
yeah? No, there's some great performances. In there. I felt Robson. I mean, he has got the one job to do of being in this case, he's the non-cooperative boss of the.
You're not
the
going
base,
with
but,
intransigent on this occasion. You don't think he merits that level of.
Well, he is being controlled by the seaweed,
He
isn't he?
is.
So it's not his fault.
He
but
is. That's true. So
it's somewhat one note.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he does go actually mad as opposed to just mostly mad, which the other ones do.
Yes.
You know, like Peter Barkworth, who Barkworth never goes barking, but here we definitely have that moment where he just storms off.
Yeah, I mean, his sort of possession acting on the Briars scale is a very sober and modest performance, but he manages to. There are kind of two camps with the character of the intransigent base leader. You're either really annoying or you're fine, and he was fine. I thought. You know, at no point did I want to slap him or turn off or go and order a pizza or anything. I was along for the ride, and even though I think there were about 3 photographs of him that they used in the recon, and I was quite tired of seeing his chin at that jaunty angle by the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely epitomised grizzled veteran, didn't he?
He certainly did.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we've got a stellar cast. We've got Deadly Dudley returning for a score. So I think they were using quite a lot of stock music this season, I seem to remember. And we've got a pretty impressive location with those bonkers forts that they use out at sea, which have been used, I think, in The Prisoner as well, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I did misremember that.
I don't know. Red Sand Seafort, apparently.
It had been used for another production, and they were somewhat nervous of using it because it wasn't in the best state of repair. So there were certain sections, you got the joining bridges, they weren't allowed to walk on those because they were considered unsafe. And if you look at the extras on the Blu-ray, I don't know if you've got the physical version, but my lord, when you see them approaching that place on a boat trying to get onto the thing, Jesus, they deserve a medal just for setting foot on it, let alone anything else. It's scary as hell.
I bet that helped them get into character with all the sort of
no action required on that
screaming.
front.
Yeah. Wow. So I noticed we've done the cast. We haven't really devoted 20 minutes to Hubert Rees, and I feel like that's the elephant on the oil rig. I feel
I should let you have the floor then, Ian. Let's hear your thoughts.
I believe in a wibbly wobbly, timey wimey kind of way, I first saw him in the War Games, which we'll talk about next year.
Okay.
He may have done even more Who than that. I don't know. He's a very difficult actor to warm to, isn't he? They might just be a class thing. I bridle at anyone who's sort of ostentatiously posh and just radiating this kind of smug toffee-nosedness, and delivering a very kind of sturdy, dependable performance. But he never really deviates from the one, I don't want to say one note, but that one sort of level of energy that he brings to everything. He's just confused man at the back of the office saying something interesting about supplies. You know what I mean? He's just
Yeah, I'm gonna take your Hubert Reese, and I'm gonna raise you a Maggie and apparently Frank Harris, right? Because I think those two characters, and I'm referring to the characters now, not the actors.
Okay.
I think the characters come straight from RADA. Because it feels to me like Harris the character is trying somehow to be both extremely deferential to authority whilst also playing the kind of young heroic lead. And I think he's going to be desperately disappointed when he finds out that he's at best fourth billing in this.
I think his moustache got one tier of billing higher than the rest of him. So that's one thing. I don't know if the same was true of Maggie's moustache.
No, I mean she is. There's more darlings in that first episode than you get on an average, BAFTA ceremony awards night, I would say.
Yeah.
It was the 60s, darling. Everyone was darling.
Yes, it's an oil rig, darling. Everyone was muck in. Oh, how wonderful. Would you pass me one of those mint juleps? Thank you, darling. Thank you. Could you turn off number 3 shaft? Oh, you already have. He looks most downcast. Sorry, Hubert. It's your turn later. You never got that in The Good Life.
No, this is true.
Yeah.
So that, I think, kind of delves fully into the cast. There's probably still people that that I can't be bothered to remember now. I mean, it was, I don't want to pre-shadow where I'm going with this or what mark I'm ultimately going to give this story. But I think that's kind of all you need to know about the human side of things.
Do we feel it does anything new with the base Under Siege? Because that is very much the flavour of season 5, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I like the fact that it's. I mean, in watching the reconstruction, it does feel quite claustrophobic. Now, I mean, I appreciate they've done that many times before, but I think it comes across that way. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it is both expansive and claustrophobic because you've got the massive sea and you've got the. Sorry, I feel, Ian, you've got something more profound to say than that.
No, not at all. I've gone blank. What was the question? Does it do anything new?
Does it bring anything new?
I think it does, in that this is the first time you've got a base which is, if not something that everyone's experienced, certainly something that's very plausible and of the time. But unlike the London Underground, it's got a much more, and I'm about to use the wrong word, but a much more plausible, convincing menace than a Yeti with a special gun that fires more sticky white love fluid around. So I think the strength of this one is in the sort of gritty, it didn't need to be an episode of Doctor Who. It could have been a one-off, play for today type drama about environmental issues and mutating seaweed. So I think that was new and original. Richard, back to you, because that was really all I had.
It's also sort of looking forward to the unit era, isn't it? In that we're going to see lots of bases like this that are set in the now or the near future, of the time that it's shown, and quite industrial. So yeah, it's got that kind of slightly, well, how gritty can it get when you look at the Harris's flat and it's got all that psychedelic wallpaper, but it does have that kind of slightly gritty industrial look to it.
Well, I like the fact that Victoria gets something to do in this one. She gets to show off her lock-picking skills.
Yes.
Yeah, she didn't hang about with that, did she? On watching the recon, it was like, Victoria is momentarily inconvenienced by a closed door and reaches for her lockpicks before she's even thought to start screaming for 10 minutes.
Meanwhile, Jamie's prattling about in the ducting, trying to climb his way through.
We know what he was doing in there. I can see into a lady's changing room, Doctor. Out of the way, Jamie.
Yeah.
What do you think of this TARDIS team, Richard? Is it a favourite of yours?
So Second Doctor is definitely my favourite. I think. I love Troughton's performance, but I just like the whole kind of vibe of the Doctor in this era. Both, I suppose, kind of I mean, he's got some authority when he needs it, but a lot of the time he's just sort of skulking around or not really wasting his time, trying to get to the centre of things. Jamie, Fraser Hines, I like him. I guess if you're going to ask me the absolute kind of peak, I probably would go for Ben Polly and Jamie, maybe from a sort of Highlanders or Moonbase era, would be
Nice.
my absolute perfection. But I think Victoria is better in this one than in some of the other ones. Sometimes
Yes, I'd agree.
She annoys me a bit with that she's just screaming, but here she seems to have a little bit more to do.
It is a shame because I think we said back when we did Abominable Snowmen that she felt like she had a bit of agency, and that very soon disappeared, and she just became a screaming lady who needed rescuing. Whereas, I think this one is certainly one of her better stories.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course we've also got Chekhov's scream in this one.
Exactly.
Well, it was probably I don't know, maybe it was something they'd had in their back pocket all season long. They thought, when we come to do our last story, we're going to use that scream. We're going to do something with it to sort of, justify the whole character.
But ironically, on the day where they were filming that, she couldn't actually scream because she had a problem with her voice. So it was Margot Hayhoe from the crew who delivered the scream. Yeah.
That's an amazing bit of... Margot Hayhoe, of course, was sadly turned down for the role of the First Doctor some years.
She was.
But managed to find a role in the production team. Yeah.
They couldn't have considered having a woman in the role that early on.
No, well, I mean, she'd only have lasted about 40 days, and they'd have replaced her with a sensible short man.
Of course, at the time, fandom would have been abuzz with "Not my Margot."
Yeah.
Not my Hayhoe.
Not My Hey-Ho is a website which I don't think anyone should try and look at on their work laptop. Anyway.
Hashtag Hey No Hey-Ho.
Yeah, hey, right.
Yeah, but Margaret, she just said, hey-ho.
I think this... I'm trying to remember the order now, but I think the previous story I'd reached a sort of emotional breaking point where I'd moved on. I was like ready to say goodbye to Victoria and in many ways to life itself. In this one, however, and I hate to do this, guys, but I'm going to have to slay a sacred cow.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
I kind of had enough of Troughton during this one. If I have to hear him in the background of a large foamy scene going, oh, one more time, I swear to God, bring on the pert already. Jeez.
Oh, careful what you wish for, Ian.
And I know, don't worry, I know. But it is a sign of the intense irritation that I had with his occasionally, I'm going to say it, one-note performance.
Wow.
I know. I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm literally hemorrhaging.
But I think you're probably
because every sentence.
Yeah, because we can't see the images. I'm sure he's bringing all sorts of incredible business with his physicality that we're not getting.
I mean, I guess if there's one thing to be said about that, this is kind of probably the moment at which it's all kind of bearing down on him. In that, it's the second year of him doing it. It's right towards the end of this particular season.
The schedule is punishing as well, isn't it?
And so it's perhaps not a surprise if he's maybe not bringing his A game to it.
Absolutely. And I think by this point he's already made more Doctor Who than I think probably most subsequent Doctors would get to do in their entire but it's just a little bit grating, and I suppose to be fair, it's more that his Doctor is repeatedly thrust into broadly the same scenario week in, week out.
Yes.
So it's not really a limitation of him so much as it is a limitation of the show and the production team, most of whom, as we know, are secretly sloping off every lunchtime to try and get a part in something at the Old Vic, because they're all actors.
Yeah. I mean, he can't even be bothered to turn it on for Maggie Harris.
No.
know,
And, three or four stories ago, when he's in The Enemy of the World, and he's confronted
he's
by
all
not
over
just
Astrid,
one hottie,
yeah.
but two of the most stunning women ever to appear in the show, he's practically agog and again.
Yeah.
Yes.
And capering around like a randy little naughty man. But with this one, there's just nothing behind the eyes. He's just like,
No.
Jamie, go and sort her out.
Spent.
I'm going out for a fag.
Well, I mean, we are, I think, reaching that point in our viewing where I'm guessing Ian is going to be somewhat more familiar with a lot of the stories that we're going to be covering. So it's not too much of a spoiler to suggest that next season is going to be a bit different from season 5. So, it's not going to stick strictly to the old Base Under Siege.
But I
it's going to be a bit
think-
more inventive.
I think, and obviously we've still got one to go, so perhaps I'm being slightly premature, but I think given the limitation that was kind of the unwritten rule for this year, I think they got away with it really well. There's only one
Yeah.
story where you're actively sitting there going, oh, for and the rest of the time they've either found a different enough setting in terms of location or time or usage to make it it really doesn't feel like it's a thing 9 times out of 10.
But I don't think they could sustain that for another season. I think that would get quite wearing quite soon.
Now, I have to say, I don't know whether this is going to be controversial or not, but I watched the animation of this when it came out about 3 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
And I struggled with it, I have to say. I mean, I as I said before, I think I'd listened to the soundtrack once before, but I think watching the animation was the first time that I'd seen a visual representation. And I found it a very dull story watching the animation. I found it kind of quite... Yeah, I mean, I suppose, as Ian was suggesting, I found like it was a bit painting by numbers. And yet, this time, and that was why I decided to watch the reconstruction this time, just to see if it brought a different energy to it. And I think, I mean, although, as Ian says, there's only about 3 photographs of some of the characters, it did... I think seeing the expressions on their faces did kind of help a bit. Because it is a little bit Scooby-Doo, the animation, in terms of you can't really see what they're feeling in it. So yeah, I feel like if you'd asked me about this having watched the animation, I'd have said, yeah, it's all a bit, it's another Base Under Siege. I've had enough of that. But this time, the story came a bit more to life. I did sort of feel some of a bit more emotion and a bit more of that kind of claustrophobia, and the beating of the heartbeat thing kind of somehow worked better with those black and white visuals for me.
Yeah, my first experience of this one was listening to the audio with the narration, and it did feel, as you say, very claustrophobic when you're just dealing purely with the audio. And there may be a little bit of feedback coming our way later in the show that makes a very good point about why it works particularly well in audio, but we'll go on.
Who narrated the audio?
Oh lordy, I can't remember.
I want to say
like a good 10 years ago.
I want to say
listened
Fraser
that.
Hines, but I mean,
could well have been.
I saw it in a shop about 35 years ago and didn't buy it, so my opinion is not gospel.
I think there are 2 versions actually. I think there was one that came out on cassette, and then there was another version that came out on CD. And I think they're different narrations, but I couldn't, with all confidence, tell you who narrated either of them.
I suppose the obvious place to finish, unless we've got anything else, is Vexit, the exit of Victoria.
Yes.
Which
I think it's handled quite nicely.
I think it's handled incredibly well. It's seeded evenly throughout the story. It's built up to. It's given enough time and space at the end of the story, you get a kind of 5-minute coda to kind of explore it, and you know, everyone sort of double checks that this is what she wants to do, and it's all very considered. And when you think what a bag of shite every subsequent companion departure was, looking at you, Leela, they could do it. They could make it. I mean, this is, for my money, the most emotional and tender leaving since Susan. If they could do it on this occasion, why couldn't they do it all the time? Why did we get, oh, go and marry Andrid? You know.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's because she had a producer who accepted that she did want to leave the show and had other plans for things to do, whereas Graham Williams, bless him, was on more than one occasion confident that his leading lady would want to stay and do another year when, in fact, they didn't.
You can see him making that mistake once, but to make it twice does speak of a particularly sort of deluded approach to life. I don't want to be rude about the Williams, because I know what you've said you'll do to me if I don't one day give 10 out of 10 to the Horns of Nymon. Help.
All of season 17.
Oh, it's the whole... Oh, good Lord. Oh.
The Imperial phase, I think we refer to
the Imperial phase, right, okay.
Yes,
So I'm going to have to get on board with Janet Ellis.
Yeah.
Indeed. If only you could.
I mean, you know, early 80s heyday for preference, but, you know, whatever.
Well,
bring it on.
Richard, do you want to save us from this
I've
quite troubling vision?
I've got sort of a few very tiny little things that I was just going to say. That I picked out. So the first one was because I now recall there was Megan Jones. We didn't talk about her earlier on.
Oh yes,
and she seems to me to have an accent that's almost as variable as Dodo's. Because she's on most occasions she seems quite RP, and then occasionally she goes into the Welsh accent, and it may be that the actress genuinely is Welsh, and she just sort of it just comes out of here and there rather than, you know. But
she could be posh Welsh, because you find in Scotland you get people, certain class of people from Edinburgh, they sound virtually English, but anyway,
And then there's a couple of great Troughton lines in episode 6. The first one is, "I've got it up all right, but how do I land it?" And then he talks about a sonic laser sound wave. I'm not entirely sure if Vic is quite across the.
He's not all over the science. Can I also offer for your consideration the cliffhanger of part 5 where he says, "It's begun. The battle of the giants." Yeah. Surely it's just the battle of mankind versus crispy seaweed as a dish. I mean, that's...
Well,
I was hoping for Godzilla versus Mothra, but sadly that wasn't to happen. But,
Also, covering your villain in foam isn't necessarily as threatening as you might think. It sort of feels a bit more like a foam party and a bit less like the Battle of the Giants somehow.
Yeah. I mean, of all the contexts where you could see Debbie Watling writhing around in foam, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to take myself outside. I'm going to suspend myself from the show. I've crossed a line. I'm sorry.
You have.
Terrible image.
I do wonder if the young Stephen Moffat, mind you, I think he's although he's a little bit older than me, he probably can't be this old. But I wonder if he got his sort of modus operandi from watching this, or from maybe reading the Target novel, because just this once, everyone lives.
Yes.
That's very true. I hadn't even noticed. This is this
That's
unprecedented?
why we have Richard on the show.
Is this the first chronological Doctor Who story when no one's died?
Well, I suppose there's Edge of Destruction.
Oh, good.
But I mean, it must be pretty close to it. Yeah.
Wow. That's another. I think that's another reason why I sort of subconsciously feel quite well disposed to this story. Yeah. So yeah, very sad that Victoria's gone, but I'm sure there'll be someone else along very soon.
You think so?
Yes.
It seems to me that over the last couple of years, he's always managed to find someone new to hang out with. just before the season break. So,
and it's funny how it happens. Almost, the next thing that they do as well.
Like literally, the next place they land, they'll find someone else who's a bit bored here. Gonna come with you. You're Patrick Troughton. I'm a woman. I don't think you're going to object. I'll get in a suitcase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they'll find a really intelligent, attractive, petite young lady, preferably a brunette. That would be nice.
It's a chance to prove
but who
it, aren't
knows?
they?
Well,
Jamie's not enough for you.
Well, he's got the legs for the kilt, hasn't he? So.
Ah.
Well, if we have nothing further to add, I think we should rate this mother. Ian.
You're coming to me first? Good Lord.
In the dock first.
Okay,
yes.
well, so I'm just going to bring my notes over because I've already written this down. So I've written down my main reasons for giving it 7 out of 10 are good use of helicopter, good performances, brackets, Oak and Quill, thoughtful departure for Victoria, and interesting plot. I won't read out my reasons for docking 3 marks, which was Hubert Reese's moustache, bloody Troughton, and I'm really not going to read that line at all.
No, okay.
So yeah, it's a very strong 7 for me. It was very nearly an 8, and I could be persuaded if you wanted to try and get me to, give it one more. Otherwise, I'm going to go with a 7.
Or maybe go with a 7.5.
That'd be disgusting.
Says he who normally chucks out 10s left, right, and centre. Richard, what would you like to score this one?
Yeah, I'm very much in the same territory. I think if you asked me after I'd watched the animation, I probably would have said it's a 5 out of 10. This one, it's all right, but I'm not buying it. But in the euphoria of the weekend, having just watched the reconstruction, I decided on 8 out of 10. I'm wondering if I've been a little bit generous now that we've chewed it over a little bit. I mean, it is. It's nice. It's got some good story elements in it. I think it does sustain over 6 episodes. It's always doing something new. It's not got that terrible back and forth that we often get in a 6-part story where 4 and 5 just don't do anything very much.
Yeah,
and generally the cliffhangers are pretty good as well. I mean, you've got Maggie Harris disappearing off into the sea.
Oh yeah, that's incredible.
Having met with
Robson.
With Robson, I'm gonna stick with 8, but I've probably overscored it on reflection. But I just need to stick with my guns.
See, now I'm thinking I should have gone 8 because that very lively storytelling that didn't drag, didn't sag in the middle, didn't depend on people interminably.
It's not too late.
Well, let's ask the people at home. Blink once if you want me to go up to an 8. Don't blink. Yeah, it's an 8. It's an 8. I'm an 8 as well.
Controversy. The scores have been changed. I'm going to follow suit. I thought it was tremendous fun. I'm not tired of Troughton yet, as opposed to my lovely colleague Ian. And it's, as you say, it's a really thoughtful farewell to Victoria. So for that reason, I'm also going to give it an 8. So that's what we thought of Fury from the Deep. Let's hear what you guys have to say about this story in our feedback section.
I've got mail.
So let's see what you guys have to say about this story. So I'm going to start out on Mastodon. We have a Mastodon account. It's AOTAS at mastodon.social. So if you want to get in touch with us there, you can find us on that address. And our first bit of feedback comes from the glorious Randomizer podcast. We love the Randomizer podcast. And they say, Oak and Quill are terrifying. Victoria departs with a heroic saving the world scream. Not a bad departure for a 60s companion. The Sonic Screwdriver debuts. Lots to like, and a shame it's missing. Next up, we have heard from David from the Metabilis 2 podcast, another fine Doctor Who podcast. We get all the best ones listening to us. And they say, Victoria gets the best companion send-off since Ian and Barbara left in Season 2. Her departure seems like the culmination of her arc over Season 5. Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, I think, goes to script editor Derek Sherwin, who changed Pemberton's script to make Victoria's scream rather than Jamie's bagpiping the sound that drives away the seaweed. Oh dear, yeah. Again, at least it wasn't the recorder. Plus, adding the bittersweet scene with Victoria and Jamie saying goodbye the night before they go their separate ways feels so heartbreaking. I was fond of her too. Oh, thank you, David.
Her too what?
Oh, just wait till we get to Perry. Anyway, moving.
I can't.
And now we're going over to Twitter. And Paul Ash says, remember being horrified by the seaweed gas men. Yeah, you and me both. They were very impressive. Another short and sweet missive from Steve on Twitter. And Steve says, brilliantly scary. And he's given us a gif of Mr. Oak or Mr. Quill, I think. Which one's which?
Oak is the short one, I think, and Quill's the tall one.
Okay, so Mr. Quill's doing his boggle-eyed, mouth open, full-on scary stuff.
Yes, he's the one who starts, isn't he, the tall guy?
Yeah. Next up, we have heard from SJQ. Slightly less enthralled than we were. Massively overrated and a shallow redraft of its radio drama Origins. Oof. The TARDIS team affect the plot not at all for the first 3 episodes. A Lovecraftian premise wasted.
Golly.
Yeah, well, we're a broad church, and we like to give everyone their voice. Even if they're wrong. No, that's great. And next up, we've heard from Jenny Rich. And Jenny says, Mr. Oak and Mr. Quill are really creepy. They are. Mm-hmm. I agree. And lastly, from me, we've heard from Chad Moore. And Chad says, a brilliant story and a genuinely touching farewell for Victoria. I know it's not part of the topic, but I loathed the animation which ruined the tale for me. Yeah.
You are not alone.
No,
you speak for fandom.
I think animations, when they're at their best, can really help to make these stories so much more easy for people to get into and enjoy. But this one, does seem to have not been so popular. It has to be said.
I wanted to love it. I'll say that. I mean, I didn't come into it determined to pan the animation. It's just kind of how it struck me.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. Before we go to Ian, we're going to hear from our dear friend Andy Moore.
Hooray!
There's seaweed in the pipes, my boys. Seaweed in the pipes, my boys. It's making a peculiar noise. Such a noise, such a noise. Victoria's voice will save the day. Scream away, save the day. But after that, she'll want to stay. Leave the doctor, that's the way. Fury from the briny blue shows drilling's not the thing to do. Inferno hung the earth as well, so put away the drill, you bell. Put away the drill, you bell. Put away the drill.
Well, guys, you've heard that. What did you make of that? Richard's seething. Look at him.
Far too talented is what I would say.
Yeah.
I would agree. But I'm here for the album when it finally drops.
Thank you, Andy. Another absolute classic. Ian.
Good evening.
Who have you heard from? Hello.
I have heard from just to spoil this. They're all from Twitter, so I'm not going to say where they're from. Jonathan at JohnMTSM21 says thus: a decent base under foam story that's bubbling, get it, with tension throughout. Would be nice to see it, but sod's law, it's missing. Honestly, the BBC's retention policy left me frothing at the mouth. Can I stop now?
Yes, please.
Brilliant.
Very good work, very fine work. I am looking for comedy writers. So, James Gorman says, one of my favourite stories from the Troughton era, genuinely terrifying and claustrophobic. I remember watching the story when it was first broadcast. Which is, you don't look that old, James Gorman. Oh, good Lord. I was sitting cross-legged on the chair, absolutely enthralled. Bit of local colour there. John Rivers.
I imagined actually that he won't have watched the story since it was first broadcast, since it was never repeated, and then it was subsequently wiped. So therefore, he could come on Something Who. Because as you may know, we never watched the story after its first broadcast either. Anyway, sorry, back to your...
Well, that's certainly been true of me since 2013. So do you want to put out a call for guests now in the middle of our show? Or do you want to wait till it's your turn?
Please keep going.
Oh, it's getting punchy in here.
I'm sorry, it's the vast quantities of tequila on the shelf behind me. Fumes. John Rivers says it's the second evolution in the Base Under Siege genre, making it feel more real by relating it to UK infrastructure. This sets up a subgenre for 70s Who, Silurians, Inferno, Axos, Hand of Fear, etc., which again... Richard, is a point you made, I think, that this kind of shapes the direction for some of those stories and makes them land much, much more easily by dint of being a much more relatable location. So thanks for that. Cliff, any voice work going Chapman, someone else who's chosen to interrupt my bit and tout for work, good Lord. Robson has one of those very specific types of voices that you used to hear all the time in British TV and film, but you don't really anymore. The effort to set up Victoria leaving, finish the threat off early, and leisurely give her an emotional farewell feels very modern. And he's right, it is. It is because we've only recently treated companions with that level of humanity and respect. But yes, Harry's music musings, the majestic Harry Whitley says,
love Harry.
We do love Harry. Lovely stuff, a little overlong, matron, but still fun. The animation is an animation. So it's getting quite a kicking, isn't it, one way and another in this review. I remember being quite excited to hear it was being animated, and maybe it was a teeny bit disappointing, but that's to be expected, I guess, when stories are hyped up. Simon on the River says, first appearance of the sonic screwdriver with some great animation of screws removing themselves from a panel. Never been bettered. Really loved this serial when it was first broadcast.
Ooh, another original viewer.
I do like this name, Axhole, which if I ever get another cat. All the problems with foams and fire retardants today. Bet they weren't using Lux dish soap. Axel, I have no idea what you mean, but thank you for writing in. And if you'd like to come and hang out, we could go to a brewery, have a couple of ales, and I could try and work out what you're on about. Michael Storm, Sandman Jazz, says, while the story ramps up the atmosphere and succeeds in creating and maintaining the threat of the weed, mainly through sound design and music, it does also lead to our characters being a bit too slow off the mark in recognising that loud noises affect it. This in turn leads to a lot of treading water around the middle. It is unusual of the era to have a domestic subplot running through the story. This adds much more depth to the season's trope of grumpy commander and sympathetic second, and makes Robson and Harris more real. Thank you, Michael.
A very fair review, I think.
Very fair review. So what have we learnt from my little roundup? People really didn't like the animation one little bit, did they?
Seems to be a running theme. Richard, who have you heard from?
Okay, so I've got some more correspondence from Twitter. So kicking off with Jason at DR Who Novels says, that rare Who story where the characters' emotions and inner lives are as important as the alien menace. Pemberton wrote Victoria's best scenes in Tomb and Abominable. but now he gets the whole script to write, and he more than delivers. So I guess that's suggesting that as script editor or assistant script editor, he's had a hand in those other stories. Yeah. Okay. We've also 26 Glorious Years at 7up 6389 says archetypal behind the sofa thrills. No wonder the Aussie censors had such a field day, and how fortunate we are that they did. Brilliant location choice, and many of the set pieces, such as Maggie Harris's cliffhanger walk into the waves, are some of the most memorable of the era. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair dues.
Indeed. My friend Anthony Carroll, at Carroll Anthony.
I think you'll find he's our friend as well, Richard.
Okay, sorry, our friend.
Which one? Because aren't there two of them?
Yeah, we've got two Anthony Carrolls.
One of them's a friend and one of them's a complete basket.
And they're both equally as good. We love them both.
They're both lovely
just the
people.
Same.
Yes.
Yes. But I have actually met this one in the real world. Again, love Base Under Siege story. Be great to see how atmospheric it may have looked. And heartbreaking ending. 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Maybe if you'd heard Richard extol the virtues of it, he might have moved up to an 8 as well.
Might have been bumped up, yeah.
We'll never know. Damien Wade, Damien Wade 15, says one of the best Troughton stories. The plot never loses focus, and Troughton has really found his footing as a Doctor at this point. Ian.
I had a moment's fleeting irritation with it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I think one of the things I love about this show is that everyone has a different take on it, and we can all take away different things from it and enjoy it in different ways.
Quite. The stylish one, at Doctor Who Style, a really great Bass Under Siege, it says. I mean, that might be a joke about the water. Yeah. With memorable side characters, superb pacing, a brilliant mystery, and a really great goodbye for Victoria. It's also genuinely scary because of what we don't get to see or find out. It's why the narrated soundtrack works so well.
All good points.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it's definitely right that we don't see an awful lot of the seaweed monster, and it's probably just as well.
Yeah.
And Dave K at David Kitchen says this story works so well on audio you'd think it was written for radio. little bit of inside knowledge there, I guess. Another strong story from an interesting and diverse season.
The one thing we didn't really touch on during our chat about it was that this does bear some similarities to a radio play that Victor Pemberton wrote for BBC Radio called The Slide.
The Slide?
Yeah.
Not the slime?
No.
Interesting. So what, there's
about sentient mud.
Right. And a big slide, like one of those ones you get at,
mud slide, maybe.
Yeah. And amongst the cast was a certain Roger Delgado.
Good Lord.
Ooh.
It all links.
It does. Well, thank you all so much for your feedback. It's great to hear from you, and if you'd like to get in touch, all the ways and means are listed over our end credits. Before we wave goodbye to Richard, we are going to have some recommendations.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, Richard, what have you got for us?
Okay, so the thing that I want to recommend is a podcast. And it's not a new podcast, but I did check to see that it's still available. And it's a podcast that's called 13 Minutes to the Moon. I don't know if either of the two of you have heard that. It's a BBC thing, but I think it's BBC World Service. It's not, and it's narrated by Kevin Fong, and it's a very compelling story. In Series 1, it's about Apollo 11 and the moon landing. And then in Series 2, it's about Apollo 13 and bringing the astronauts home. But in both cases, he goes into the story in great detail with some of the people that were involved. And you get a real sense of just how close Triumph and Disaster were in that era of the space race. So yeah, I very much enjoyed both of those. I'm a an engineer by trade, and I've always been interested in technology and in particular space race. So I found that fascinating, and I think again the way that it takes it bit by bit through the process is very good as well. So that's my recommendation.
Marvellous. I learned something today that blew my tiny mind.
Ooh.
Apparently, and I'm Wikipedia backs this up, Jack Black's mother was a scientist who helped create the guidance system on the Apollo missions.
Mrs. Black.
Well,
The irony is,
husbands now,
Jack
but,
Black's mother was June Brown. I've gone cross-eyed.
Yeah, no, both his parents were scientists.
Wow.
And,
That's incredible. The
That
apple fell far from the tree because of the retro thrusters that were fitted at a specific angle, thus to ensure.
The story
maximum
goes
velocity.
she was pretty much literally writing the code or whatever it is that she had to do at the point where she was going into hospital to give birth to young Jack.
Wow. He's a Fortran baby or something.
Well, thank you for that, Richard. I am going to recommend a documentary, and it's called Doctor Who Am I? And that links rather nicely with Richard's appearance on this episode, because Richard, you got to interview the two key players behind that documentary on your podcast, didn't you?
I did. I was quite lucky in that I screwed up the courage to ask Matthew Jacobs, and he just said, "Yeah, sure." So it was actually quite easy. But they're lovely people. Actually, they were very easy to talk to, and it's the best of all interviews. You really just press play or record or whatever, and then let them get on with it, and interject every now and then, but not very much.
It's a really heartwarming documentary.
It is.
I don't want to give away too much
Yeah.
for those who haven't watched it yet, but obviously Matthew Jacobs has got a long connection with Doctor Who because his dad was in the Gunfighters. He played Doc Holliday, and of course he was the author of the TV movie as well. So yes, it's a great documentary about his relationship with Doctor Who fandom, and he's kind of questioning whether he is a fan and how fans react to him and all that kind of stuff. And it even features Mr. Stephen Shapansky from Radio Free Skaro. Yeah, it's great. So it's out on Blu-ray and DVD and all the other places you can find this stuff. I think it's even on BritBox.
Yes.
Ian, what would you like to recommend?
Good evening. I recently watched all 8 episodes of the new Netflix drama The Diplomat, which is like a sort of giddy cross between 24 and The Crown, in which a US diplomat is sent to London, which is filmed in a very wonderful, glorious way. And there's lots of lovely shots of the American embassy, which is that building with all the metal wibbly bits, which looks rather wonderful. And there's the usual internecine plots involving duplicity and international terrorism. It was a marvellous evening. Really good entertainment. I enjoyed it very much.
Anyone we know in the cast, or is it all relatively unknowns?
So there's a name I knew. Rufus Sewell plays the husband. I don't think I've ever seen him in anything else, but he's one of those people that's always been alive and around.
My wife is rather a fan of Rufus Sewell.
God, I'll tell you who is in it, who's germane to our interests. Now I come to think of it, thank you. Pearl Mackie. Bill
great.
from Doctor Who, with a frankly staggeringly good American accent. Spoilers, she plays an American.
Wow. That's ruined it for me now.
I thought for a second you were going to say Hubert Green.
Just the moustache framed.
Oh, brilliant. Well, 3 very different things to take away from this episode. Richard, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on as a guest. Would you like to give you've got a couple of podcasts on the go. Would you like to give them a plug?
Sure. Yes. Well, So Something Who, I guess, is the one that's most likely to appeal to listeners of this. And the basic premise of Something Who is that we take 2 Doctor Who stories, one from the original series and one from the modern series, and they have some kind of a linking theme between them. We talk about both of them, and then we chew over the linking themes. But I mean, that's the premise, and we do all of that. But fundamentally, it's a good reason for some people to get together and have a chat about stuff. And I hope that they are, entertaining as well as interesting. I mean, I've been lucky that some of the people that come and talk to me about these things actually know what they're talking about, and so we do get some really quite interesting observations, and then also there's a bit of frippery as well. Although actually the last few that I've done, as you allude to, Mark, have all been special episodes. So we did a 2-part look at the Omni-Rumour.
I devoured
10 years
that.
on.
That was so good.
And I'm lucky in that sense because Tim, who does a Missing Episodes podcast, and Paul, are both contributors and to Something Who and friends of mine, because we're all obsessed by missing episodes. So when we realised that 10th anniversary was coming up, Tim and Giles and I had a crack at what have we learnt in 10 years, if anything. So if you're interested in missing episodes, that's worth a listen. You've talked about the Doctor Who on my episode. We also spoke to Steve Manfred recently, who is associated with Neil Gaiman, and he talked about some of the
that was quite interesting.
Yes, sort of how those stories were put together, and his influence in that. So yeah, and the next episode that will be out, which we've already recorded, I just haven't got round to editing yet, is the Sunmakers and Oxygen. So that's back to our classic format.
Oh, don't worry. By the time this episode comes out, it'll probably be around another 20 down the line. So don't worry.
Well, maybe, and then at least this will timestamp it for listeners, and then the other podcast I do is called "If It's Hurting, It's Not Working."
Yes,
and this is about, I suppose, my line of work. So as well as I said earlier, as being an engineer, actually these days I'm what they call an enterprise architect, which is really kind of a pretentious American phrase, but it sort of means somebody who's involved in technology strategy. But I mean, the great thing about being an enterprise architect is that my 6-year-old self would have been delighted with the word enterprise in a job title, and my mum always wanted an architect in the family, so everyone's happy really. But in addition to that, at work I'm also an employee representative. So the company where I work, I'm the chair of our employee representative body, so we are sort of listening to ideas, I suppose, that people have, or things that aren't just quite working for them, and then talking to senior management about that and trying to make some things happen. And so this podcast is my attempt to bring some of that experience into the public domain. So we're not talking about the company where I work, we're not talking about people's issues, but we are talking about how to make work a better experience. Because as the strapline goes, if we're working 9 to 5 days a week, and a lot of people do, it's a lot of time to put into something that if you don't like it, if it's a real pain in the neck, then that's a lot of your life to waste. So we're kind of trying to talk about how you can make things a bit better, and how you could get a bit more fun out of it. And look, I mean, I'm not the sort of person who wakes up on a Monday morning and thinks, great, it's a work day. But at the same time, I like to wake up and not think, oh, not that thing again. So, and I guess, somewhere in between the two.
Yeah.
That does sound like a very good thing for pretty much anyone with a job to listen to, just as a... There is maybe more to life than loathing 9 hours of your day.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
We shall put some links in the show notes if you want to check it out. Richard, thank you so much. It's been such a fun evening, and we'd like to have you back again sometime if you will.
Well, sure. Look, I mean, it's been really lovely to meet both of you, and so I mean, I think the pleasure has been mine. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Mark, I just on a similar note, opposite note, I'm actually leaving. I'm going to live with this couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harris.
Oh, right,
I
okay.
won't be on the show anymore. I will be on.
That's fine.
Mr.
Well,
and Mrs. Harris.
Richard and I are going to go off and find someone a bit less screamy and.
You won't find anyone with better legs than me, honey.
And on that bombshell, we'll see you next time. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.
Excellent.
There we go, that'll do.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Oh, thanks, Richard. That was great.
Quick question, Richard.
Yeah.
Did you ever read any of the New Adventures or the Eighth Doctor books?
No, I don't think I've read a single one.
Right, well, you can't be on my other podcast.
And you could do if you
I
wanted
mean, you
to.
could, but it would be, even less conclusive than some of the other episodes.
Yeah.
No
yes.
worries.
And the reason for that is that I, when they started to come out, it was about 90 or 91. I was just leaving university and starting to get married, and it was like, I was trying to
away
pretend
childish things.
that I was not a geeky so and so,
Right.
and then
And now look at you.
things slide over many
They
years.
do. I needed the Virgin books because the show had just been cancelled and I wasn't emotionally ready to progress in life. By the time the Eighth Doctor books came out, I was in that position of I've left university. I'd like to have sex with a lady at some point. I'm not going to put these on my wall and display them. And now you can't actually see them. They are displayed in a little bookcase down here.
Fantastic.
And he's married to a lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.